the situation in Syria. After all, we had the statement from Assad talking about the situation. It seems that he was in Syria until uh, December 8th, and after the fall of Damascus, he has decided to leave Syria. And what was your understanding, your take from what he has said in that letter?
Uh, there's a part of me that the human part of me, I like to think that feels sorry for the man. I think in many respects he was hoodwinked. He did a lot to hoodwink himself. He believed a lot of things that he shouldn't have believed. But I do think that he had genuine concern about the integrity and long lastingness, if you will, of Syria as a state. And now all of that's in question. And the cavalier disregard, apparently, that he had for his family. I mean, that's what it looks like anyway. I'm going to Russia. You guys fare for yourself. I don't know if that's the way it worked out, but that's the way it looks like it worked out. And the fact that he went to Russia rather than going to the bosom of his fellow Arab allies is a stunning thing too, to me. I know the duplicity and conniving nature of his Arab allies, the two-facedness of them, indeed the three or four-facedness of them, having dealt with Prince Bandar in our own government. But still, that's a hell of a statement for this former Arab leader of a key Arab state to go to Russia rather than to go to the bosom of his Arab allies. It says something about the dynamics in West Asia. So I just don't know what's going to happen to him. I would say that his lifetime is probably limited, severely maybe. I don't know that that's the case, but I would think there are so many people who would probably like to eliminate him that if he comes out of Russia and goes anywhere else, he probably will be tracked down. That's sad to say. I was talking to you earlier before we went on about a political scientist that I listened to today at great length. He went on in English, Italian. He's Italian, but he went on in good English, like most Europeans, unlike most Americans speaking their language. And one of the things he said that stuck with me was that the empire, America, has moved from really the period of 9/11 to the present period in a way that's normalized bestiality in the world. And he characterized accurately that bestiality's two principal instruments as being war through proxies or directly, and sanctions. 3 billion people in the world, 3 billion people, Nima, under our sanctions of one form or another. I just signed off on a letter asking Biden, the worst president the United States of America has had since World War II. No question about it. That's my portfolio. That's what I taught. Presidential decision making from 1945 to Obama's decision to cajole NATO into doing Libya for him. That's the period I taught. He is the worst president in that period, no question about it. He's gotten the empire in more trouble. He's normalized this bestiality. That's what he's done. Him and Blinken and Sullivan and Biden. And this is going to be a hell of a legacy because, as the scientist pointed out, the Italian pointed out, this more or less negates international criminal justice. It negates international law. Hell, it negates the United Nations and everything that we put it together for in the beginning of the 50s. It negates everything that we have worked for in the way of humanitarian law in the world and international law in the world. You can condemn all the courts as being prejudiced here, prejudiced there, all the different apparatuses as being talking shops and so forth. They nonetheless serve their purpose. As Sir Nigel Rodley said to me in Syracuse, Sicily, we bother the buggers. We bother the buggers. And he meant bothering the people who foster bestiality. That's what he meant. Well, now we're taking those things away. And the empire is largely responsible for it. It's had its henchmen. It's had its henchmen all over Europe and in other places too. But principally the West has done this, created this practice of bestiality, foreign policy, security policy through bestiality. You have to go back to the Athenians on the island of Melos to find this sort of tragic situation. That's a long time ago. And yet we've brought that back. And I think this political scientist is absolutely right.
Larry, the situation in Syria right now, how do you find the policy? It seems that the Biden administration, they have said they had more than connection with them. I don't know what does that mean, but
let me tell you what it means. I just went over the map of where the United States is in Syria. 9 different places, 3 of them principally to steal oil. One of them at this moment, while we're talking, Nima, stealing oil and pumping it to Israel. That's where the United States is. We are all up and down that corridor between the southern tip where the Jordan border impacts and all the way up to where Mount Hermon and the Israelis are now celebrating their new ski resort. A friend of mine said, can you imagine how Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and others are salivating now because they're looking at settlers going onto properties that are probably valued in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per hectare. This is incredible what we have gotten our hands on now. And we are not going to turn it loose. That's where we are. And the United States is there, big time there. And it remains to be seen what Erdogan and his forces, which are aimed at least limiting the Syrian Kurds' mobility, and maybe eliminating quite a few of them, are going to do with us backing them, because we're backing them. And they're the ones affording us what external security we have, because you can't really provide a lot of internal security with that few troops and doing what they're doing. So our security is coming from our back, Jordan, and to a certain extent from Iraq, and it's coming from the Kurdish forces. And Erdogan wants to punish those forces severely. So hold on, let's see what happens. But we're there. We are there big time. And Biden's lying through his teeth if he says the only place we are is in Damascus, whomever, speaking with Jelani or whomever.
How long does it take for the United States to withdraw from the support of these new people in Syria?
We won't. We won't, not unless they turn in a way that we can't handle propaganda-wise. Then we'll turn on them. Well, same way we turned on Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was our bud when we were in Afghanistan pushing the Soviets out. Then Al-Qaeda struck the tower and, hit the Pentagon and did a few damages to the United States. And so then they became our enemy. I'm not absolutely confident now, from all the archives and data and information I've looked at and people with whom I've talked who know what they're talking about in the intelligence community, the security community at large, I'm not sure that all of this wasn't part of a plan. Not that the plan was executed exactly according to Hoyle, but I'm not sure that, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by and large, but I am a theorist that knows, for example, that JFK was assassinated by the United States government. Rogue elements, you want to call them? Okay, well, maybe there's some mafia, maybe there's some CIA, maybe there's some military. We wait to see if it ever comes out. But I know Kennedy was assassinated. That's no conspiracy. I know he was assassinated. I know that Oswald did not shoot John F. Kennedy, period. By the same token, I know that this is too much of a tapestry. And too many things have fallen in line in support of what they call the clean break strategy, the strategy that said, let's put the Levant, let's put the Middle East and North Africa, let's put it in complete chaos, that'll protect Israel. But it'll also reestablish over time our hegemony over the region. And we won't have to worry about Persian Gulf oil or anything like that anymore, or rare earth metals, whatever might be discovered. We won't have to worry about it because we'll be in charge. And that's what we've been implementing ever since that strategy became apparent to my first president in my studies was H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush, Papa Bush. And the fairy tale or reality, I actually saw the memo he wrote it on, was when Paul Wolfowitz sent him that paper, which later became George W. Bush's, his son, Bush II's, national security strategy. He sent it back to the Pentagon with a handwritten note in the margin saying, send this back to the crazies in the basement of the Pentagon. Now, that was a proper, appropriate appraisal of that paper. But then came his son, and ever since we've been implementing that strategy. We were implementing it before on the sly, but we started officially, presidentially blessed, implementing it at that time. That strategy says we will be a primary power in the world forever and a day. The primary power in the world forever and a day. That no one must be allowed to challenge us, no matter how small, how medium-sized, how large. And that's what we're doing. And the Middle East is an important place for us to do this. Look at what we've done. We have essentially driven Russia out. And I don't blame Russia for doing that because they got a much more serious situation in Ukraine where we're also trying to bleed them to death. And Georgia and Romania, name some more places. And so getting out of the Levant, getting out of the Middle East, they can come back probably anytime they want to with regard to Iran and their defense treaty with them. But I understand why Putin is doing that. But that's a victory for us. It's a victory for us. Just like when we get Georgia to join the fight, it's going to be a victory for us. Moldova, going to be a victory for us. This is what the empire is doing. And the strategy is, with some hiccups and some perturbations, moving right along. And Syria is the latest unexpected but planned for development.
As you mentioned, we have Iran and Russia out of Syria right now, out of the Syrian equations. Right now, I'm talking about we don't know about the future.
Yeah.
But
I understand Iran's got a party there right now in Damascus talking with Jelani. I don't know that that's true, but I was reported that by a fairly reputable person. I'd be doing that if I were Iran. I'd at least send an emissary. What's your plan, my man?
It's obvious that they're trying to make some political moves on Syria to see what would be the reaction from the current people in Syria. But if we assume that Russia and Iran are out of Syria right now, the burden is on Turkey and the United States.
And Israel.
And Israel, exactly. Yeah. How do you see the future of the conflict? Do you think, it seems to me that in the future, we can have some sort of conflict between Turkey and Israel? Because that's, if they go the way that they're trying to, when you look at the policy in Israel, they're trying to capture as much as they can from Syria. Turkey has the same sort of policies, but it's somehow different, but it's the same sort of policy. And you have these people in Damascus. How, in your opinion, is there any possibility of having a conflict between Turkey and Israel? And under any set of circumstances, any set of conditions?
I'm not going to rule anything out in that regard, because I've been surprised a number of times in the past, particularly by Turkey and by Israel. But what I would say right now is it doesn't seem to be in either state's interest to come into direct conflict with the other. And I say that because if Erdogan is passing on his leadership to his foreign minister or to whomever, and if he is intent on passing on a reasonable prospect for, now I won't say recreating the Ottoman Empire, but giving it a good kick in the fanny to get started, I don't think he wants to start it at this particular moment in a very obvious way. I could be wrong. He could go after Israel tomorrow morning. By the same token, I don't think Netanyahu wants to take on that project. I think he wants as much of Syria as he can get. He's now talking about securing the Golan, and I was reading in Haaretz about what's already got. This man, Israel is just a motor machine. They've got all these people going out there with bulldozers and everything. They're already developing the land. They're already getting ready to lay foundations and build, shopping centers and highways. So he's got his hands full right now, I think, just with the extension of the Golan, having the Syrian side of the Golan Heights and a little bit beyond that for a buffer zone. But he's exploring further. So as long as no one checks him in that, and heaven be damned that the United States ever check him in anything, he's going to keep inching and inching and inching and inching and get as much of it as he can. He's going to inch over towards Jordan too, I suspect. This ceasefire that Haaretz is reporting on right now, fairly hopefully, which is unusual for these particular people writing in Haaretz to be doing right now, I think, that this ceasefire looks like almost a complete surrender by Hamas. It's not a lot of Hamas prisoners coming out of prison. It's the hostages that remain alive, or a reasonable number of them coming back. Israel stays in Gaza as the security force for an indeterminable period. If I'm reading Haaretz right about the details of this, and I think it was Smotrich who's reported in Haaretz, or Ben Gvir, or both of them, saying this will pass in the Knesset in a lightning flash. So it must be pretty conducive to Israel's interests. Syria has, in a certain way, done this. It's taken all the focus off of Gaza, even the humanitarian focus, even the brutality, bestiality focus. And I think the Gazans are looking at themselves now and saying, we have no allies. We have no friends. We have no allies. Hamas must be thinking that way too. It's a dire situation for them, really. And I think you could say with some credibility, this is the absolute end of a two-state possibility. That doesn't mean we can't go other directions, but that might be more positive. But I think it's the end. I heard someone today, maybe it was Jeffrey Sachs, I can't remember, but I listened to a number of people this morning talking about, let's just build two states and put a huge wall between them. I think we're past that. I don't think Israel would even in a minute sign up to that. And it's mainly because Netanyahu has given them this legacy of bestiality, of conquering hero, of land grabber, of bringing into being Judea, Samaria, and the greater Zionist dream, and prospects of even more. I don't think you're going to arrest that anytime soon. The one power that could, and you alluded to it, is Turkey. They could put a real fly in this map very quickly. But I don't think they're going to. I really don't. I think Erdogan, most of the time now, his mouth overloads his ability to fulfill what his mouth has uttered, or his courage doesn't overflow in order to do the things that he hints or intimates that he might do. And we can talk about him wanting an Ottoman Empire all day long and wanting to get it started and starting in Syria and all those sorts of things. He's still got to confront the United States of America and the empire. And the empire has normalized bestiality, as we said before, and will do anything to stop anyone who seems to be doing anything injurious to our little plaything in the Eastern Mediterranean called Israel. Because they're doing our bidding, Nima. They're doing our bidding. I'm absolutely convinced now that we have this backwards when we say Israel has Biden. Biden has Israel.
Larry, let's get started with this statement by Bashar al-Assad.
Yeah.
And he's talking about what has happened in Syria and how he left Syria. What are the important points in this statement, in your opinion?
Well, the most important point is he takes no responsibility for what happened. He's, here is a man that, now with the benefit of hindsight, you could say if he had made improving the lives of the Syrian people a priority, if over the last 5 years he'd been begging Russia, China, Iran for economic support, for money to upgrade and improve the lives of his people who were suffering under sanctions. Yeah, that would have said something about him, but it didn't. He was, I guess he thought he was Jay Leno. Jay Leno's a comedian who was a TV host of The Tonight Show in the United States, and he was known for collecting cars. So he has there's an enormous collection of cars. Oh, well, that was Bashar al-Assad. Assad was collecting luxury automobiles, taking care of his family, making sure they had good jobs. And yet, what's really sort of shocking about it is he realized his time was coming to an end as the leader of Syria. He made no provisions for several members of his family, cousins and such. He basically left them out, hung them out to dry, and they ended up getting killed. So, Bashar al-Assad will go down in history as just an afterthought, a man of no consequence, a man who lost his country and helped destroy it. It's like, go out and ask the average person on the street to name the last president of Afghanistan. I don't even remember the guy's name. He's a nobody, and that's what Bashar al-Assad is a nobody who's not going to be of any consequence in negotiating future political deals. He's not going to be somebody that folks feel they need to go talk to. So this is the statement he finally put out. It's pretty shameful, in my view.
He didn't mention any sort of detail about that day, but he said that until December 8th, he was in Syria, in a Russian base. And then he decided after the fall of Damascus, he has decided to leave Syria. And Larry, how do you see right now the role of Russia in the whole situation? Because they have tried to do everything to save him, it seems, the way that he's talking about it.
Well, I've used in the past the illustration of, a friend, not necessarily a family member who's a drug addict or an alcoholic, and you keep trying to intervene to help them, and they keep going back, buying more drugs, drinking more booze. At some point, you have to just step back and let them hit bottom, and sometimes they'll die. That's where Russia is. Russia was stepping in to try to prevent the spread of, it wasn't so much the spread of radical Islam as it was recognizing that the United States and Israel were trying to use Syria at the time as leverage to put pressure on Russia. Russia thwarted that pressure for a while. But now, I think they've, Putin and his generals took stock of the situation and recognized that there was nothing to be gained by Russia by staying involved and fighting these other forces there on the ground, because that was not where the primary battle is being waged. The primary battle right now, at least militarily, is on the ground in Ukraine. But there's also a broader, let's call it diplomatic, political battle being waged against BRICS and all countries that are trying not to fall under the control of the United States. So the United States is actively promoting unrest in Georgia. They are working to split off Armenia from its traditional relationship with Russia, and so far, the president of Armenia, Pashinyan, is going along with that plan. So the West is intent on trying to crush and destroy Putin, destroy the Russian state, and take control of the place. I can't emphasize that enough. That is It's diabolical. It really is. The United States can't leave others alone, and that's why I come back and use the term the United States has become like a serial rapist. That we're going to violate every other country if we can, just for our own selfish needs. And I think it's morally wrong. It's ultimately going to, I think, destroy the United States. You can't embark on this kind of imperialist ambition and then hope to remain intact and accepted and influential to the world. You don't see people lining up and say, man, boy, those Americans, they're great. I love to be around them. I think it's just the opposite.
Larry, what's going on right now in the mind of Israelis? Because they're attacking, they're just destroying everything.
Yeah.
And what's their fear, in your opinion, if they're winning?
Well, they've climbed into bed with radical Sunni Islamists. And the belief of those Islamists ultimately is that the Jews have no right to rule or reign over Jerusalem. So, although right now they're working, the Israel or the Zionists are in bed with Al-Jalani and HTS, and are working with MIT, the Turkish intelligence organization. Nonetheless, I think Israel's not taking any chances, because they recognize these guys would take those weapons and use them against them, or they're also wanting to make sure they don't make it the way into the hands of Hezbollah. So, Israel's always played this double game. Back in, was it 80, 81, right after the rise of the Ayatollah Khomeini and the Iranian Revolution. Israel was dealing directly with Iran at that time and providing weapons to Iran in order to try to defeat Iraq. They were more concerned with Saddam Hussein back then. So, Israel's always shown, despite the claims that they are not, that they strongly oppose all radical Islam, in terms of their actual conduct, they'll make a deal with the devil. There's no principle. It's all about survival. And, if you have to, cut off part of your arm to survive, they'll cut off part of their arm. That's sort of the mentality. So, what they're doing here is they're going to destroy everything that could potentially be used militarily. But Israel now creates a problem for itself. It's not like it's it's got 20 million people that are crammed in that small area in Israel. And boy, oh man, we need Lebensraum. We need more living space. We don't have enough space for us. Just the opposite's been happening since the start of the war with Hamas a year ago, October. An estimated 1 million Israelis have bailed out, gone overseas, gone to the United States principally, or some other spots in Europe. So they don't have a manpower surplus. And yet they're now expanding the territory where they're going to have to provide security, and they're going to have to try to control movements of supplies back and forth across the border. And when you look at particularly at the border between Syria and Iraq, uncontrollable. No, neither the United States nor Turkey have the manpower or are going to commit the resources required to cover that border and prevent smuggling. And I've heard that there has been smuggling going on in that region for probably at least 2,000 years, maybe longer. So the notion that this is going to suddenly come to an end and Hezbollah is not going to have any weapons, I think that's silly. Hezbollah still remains from Israel's point of view, a threat, and one that it's not, it still hopes that the Israelis still hope that they can push Hezbollah north of the Litani River, but I don't know if they will achieve that. I don't think they will. But this is just a recipe for chaos. And then add to it, if this isn't enough, you've got these voices in Israel calling for them to attack Iran right now. Let's go hit them. Let's go bomb Iran, because we'll be able to destroy their nuclear force or their nuclear research program. They're obsessed with that. And I believe if they do that, this will turn this into a global war. This will not be just an isolated regional war, because I do not believe that Iran is so weak that it would be overcome by an Israeli attack and would be unable to respond. Just the opposite. I think Iran's held off on retaliating for the October 1st attack. And I think part of that has come in as a result of consultations with Russia, where Russia's been advising restraint, because they're looking at it more from the political standpoint of Iran gaining some influence in the region as not being a bunch of crazed religious fanatics, but actually a country that's carefully weighing pros and cons of actions and trying to act in accordance with international rules.
It seems what's going on right now in Syria is a huge question mark in the mind of not only Russia and Iran, but also the United States and Israel.
And Turkey. Let's not forget Turkey.
Yeah. But Larry, it seems that the way that Bashar al-Assad was talking about their economy, their army, that was totally devastated. It was a huge burden on the shoulders of Iran and Russia. Right now, it's all transferred on the shoulders of Turkey, in my opinion. To some extent, Israel and the United States, because they're in that region right now. The United States supporting Kurds, and Israel is at their border. That's why they're attacking, they're destroying everything. Don't you think that in a long run, this may influence or may improve the situation with the resistance? Because the main problem between Turkey and Iran was the situation in Syria. Right now, that's gone for the time being.
How's it gone? Explain that to me.
Because it's in the hand of Turkey. Right now, Iran is not there. It's just Turkey together with the United States and other players. That's why Iran is not participating in what's going on right now. It seems to me that right now there is because so far we had some sort of attrition between Iran and Turkey in terms of Syria.
Well, actually, I don't think Iran has completely backed out and cut all ties with the various groups, particularly with the Shia communities in Syria. I guarantee you Iran's still in contact with them. They're not abandoning them. What came out over the weekend, I heard Alexander Mercouris, I don't recall the particular article who wrote it, but in this article they're making the point that in fact Syrian intelligence had been collaborating with Israeli intelligence and targeting IRGC commanders that were moving in and out of Syria, and that the Israelis used that information to target and murder some of those IRGC commanders. So from that standpoint, the Syrians were playing a very bad double game. From the perspective right now of who's in control of Syria, which part of Syria depends. And the reality is nobody's in control. HTS, Harat Tahrir al-Sham, has been dressed up as, it's really bizarre. It's sort of like the first time you've seen it, somebody that you knew as a man dressed up as a woman. It's like looking at a transgender that's cross-dressing. It's jarring. It goes, that doesn't look right. Because HTS is claiming to be this moderate, almost secular, progressive group of reformers. They were beheading people, for God's sake. And up in Idlib, where they were in charge, very brutal. Wouldn't allow, women had to be covered. They had to be covered. And there are already reports that Christians are being attacked and murdered, as well as Shia, as well as Alawites. So this isn't under anybody's control. And then to add into the mix, so you've got a group of Kurds that are aligned with Syria, aligned with Turkey, and then you got a group of Kurds that are aligned with themselves. They want to be free. They're backed more by the United States. So you look at the United States and Turkey trying to figure out how to avoid getting into a war with each other over the Kurds. And the Kurds are important because they control basically the oil that is in Syria that's been discovered and can be pumped out, can be a source of income. But there is no effective government. The people, quote, working for the government, they're not collecting a salary. Who's paying it? It's not clear that there's a central bank still in place that's functioning and dealing, facilitating commerce. Plus, you've got all these economic sanctions that were still imposed on Syria. So, who's in charge? HTS is just, Jelani is just a figurehead at this point. And he has not demonstrated himself to be a political force with a great reservoir of support. It's just the opposite.
Do you think that in Israel, they do feel that in a long run, they're going to be the winner, or it's just a result for a short term? I would argue for Netanyahu and his position right now, because he's not in a good position right now in Israel.
Well, from a short-term perspective for the Israelis, man, they think that they've won the lotto. Oh man, with the lottery, we're billionaires. They've got all the money they need. They think. Then they're going to find out, hey, they've imposed a new tax policy. The government's going to take 80% of what you want. They're going to discover that having created this kind of chaos in Syria, because at least, again, as we saw with some of the stories coming out, that when Assad's in power and you have the Syrian intelligence and the Syrian military, there are at least people who had an institutional incentive to exercise some control over particular areas, prevent certain activities. Now you don't have that. It's now like anything goes, and there are criminal organizations in Syria, some that are involved with drug trafficking. Those folks have the organization. They've got the money. They've got the financial incentive. And, how do they operate? They'll pay you off to, not bother them, or they'll kill you if you get in their way. And I don't think Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is strong enough, nor is ISIS strong enough to counter that particular influence. So what you're looking at here is a chaotic state. And that means the people are going to be moving, trying to find some safety, some security somewhere, which means increased refugee flows into Turkey, into Jordan, into Iraq, into Lebanon. Israel's not going to let them in. They'll say the Druze communities there along the border said, oh, we want to be Israelis now. Okay, go for it, guys. Get to be second-class citizens.